For all those who are joining us, we are recording tonight's session, and we're happy to make it available to folks after at the conclusion of tonight's event. Well, not necessarily at the conclusion, soon thereafter, so we can edit the beginning, me rambling about recording it, and the ending. Let's begin. Mr. Lavin.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Shane Lavin of the Xavier class of 2003 and Director of Annual Giving at Xavier. Thank you for joining us for the 6th event of Xavier's 175th anniversary lecture and conversation series. Tonight, we welcome Dr. James Morgan of the class of 82 and parent of 2012, the founder of Lamp for Haiti, which works with and for the people of Haiti to improve the lives of some of the most marginalized persons in Haitian society. We welcome him to this virtual conversation with President Jack Raslowsky. Dr. Morgan grew up in Essex County, New Jersey, and followed his father and 3 brothers to 16th Street, where he played football and rugby. After graduating from Xavier, Jim completed both his undergraduate education and medical school at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. He did his residency in internal medicine at Loyola University Chicago Medical Center, where he was chief resident. Dr. Morgan is certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine and the American Board of Hospice and Palliative Care. He is a member of the International Society of Travel Medicine, and Jim is currently the Director of Palliative Medicine at Holy Name Medical Center in Teaneck, New Jersey. He and his wife, Dr. Ellen Cunningham, have 2 sons, Daniel of the class of 2012 and Jude. Dr. Morgan served on Xavier's Board of Trustees from 2013 to 2019. In June of 2010, he was awarded the Insignis Medal, Xavier's highest honor. He was inducted into the Xavier Hall of Fame this past October. Jack Raslowsky is Xavier's 33rd and longest serving president. Before his time at Xavier, Jack served as the superintendent of public schools in Hoboken, New Jersey, the provincial assistant for lay formation and education of the New York Province Jesuits, and for many years in a variety of roles at St. Peter's Prep. Jack and his wife, Sarah, have 4 children, who have all had the blessing of a Jesuit education in schools and colleges across the country, including Xavier, Santa Clara, Georgetown, and even Regis. Thanks again for joining us. Now to Jack and Jim.
Thanks so much, Shane. Appreciate the kind introductions. And Jim, thank you so much for being with us. I'm coming to folks tonight from the campus of Georgetown University, from Wolfington Hall, the Jesuit residence here, through the kindness of the community, the Jesuit community here. And I mentioned to Jim as we were coming on, I just came back from a program, an undergraduate program called Making an Exoneree. And these are undergraduates enrolled in a class with the professor here, Mark Howard, and a formerly incarcerated person, Marty Tanclough. And they're bringing their course to a conclusion, and they work with those who are wrongly imprisoned. And as I was sitting there, I'm saying, boy, this is a great model. This is Jesuit education at its best. And coming back here to begin this conversation with Jim, I think of Jim's work and the witness that he has provided for so many. And Jim is an example of Jesuit education at its best. Now, he will be uncomfortable with me beginning that way, and I won't go on for too long. But one of the reasons I invited Jim into this conversation is our mission speaks about sending folks forth to transform the world for God's greater glory. Right? That's our aspirational hope. Right? That's our mission hope. And that can happen in ways big and small. And it happens in family life and community life and work, right? And it happens in the way we live our lives in service to others. And Jim does so many of those things so well. And I'm just delighted that he accepted the invitation to engage in conversation. So Jim, thank you. Thanks for being with us. And let's begin. Your work in Haiti has now been going on for close to 2 decades, right? And take us to the beginning. How did it start? How did you get roped in, if you will? Right? Where did you make the commitment? Tell us the beginning of the story.
Before I do that, I just have to say, Jack, I want to meet that Jim guy. He sounds like a saint. That's certainly not me. But I appreciate the accolades. If would that my mother were around to hear those that praise, but I'm sure she's.
Ellen has asked for rebuttal time at the end.
Yeah, I'm sure. I wouldn't be surprised. However, back to the question. Thanks for that kind introduction. I had, when I first had an interest in going to medical school, I can remember in college, I had gone to Creighton and being home, working, I actually had a summer job working for a doctor in New York City. From time to time, I would have lunch down in Chinatown with Father Jim Higgins, who was working downtown. And he and I had become friendly during my time at Xavier when I was once in the hallway when I should not have been, and he popped his head out the door and quickly gave me jug. But he and I developed a friendship despite that. And so we would have lunch from time to time. And, that was a period in my life when I was sort of in my discernment period about which direction I wanted to go. And one of the things that I had told Jim Higgins at that time was, I could envision myself working somewhere in the developing world in the quote unquote missions. And he also had that as an aspiration when he was a young priest. And he had talked about working in Africa. And I said, wow, that would be kind of cool if the two of us did that at some point. Well, he, of course, went up to Buffalo and became a school administrator. And I became a doctor and got married and moved from Omaha to Chicago. So, and then back to New York. But it was, so it was really in 2001 when I was working in New York City at St. Vincent's in the emergency department there. And it was really just before 9/11 happened. I happened to run into Vin Biaggi, and he told me, he said, Jim, I'm going to take some kids from Regis High School. And this is now the second time we're mentioning Regis already in this, and we're not even 10 minutes into this thing. So
you know what I say, Jim, you get what you pay for.
Yeah. Vin and I talked, and he invited me to be one of the chaperones. There were two other chaperones there. So we took these kids down and saw things that I really thought that I had seen dire straits before, but I hadn't. And it's really had a big impact on me, being there for a couple of weeks with these students, seeing people, the level out really in the countryside, the level of poverty that existed out there. At the time, we did not go to into Cité Soleil where LAMP works now, because it was considered much too dangerous for us to even venture in, even in a with a vehicle. And so I remember coming back after that trip, thinking, boy, I really feel impacted by this, and I really feel like I'd like to continue to stay involved. But life sort of unfolded, right? 9/11 happened. I was an ER doctor at the time. My father my dad had a spinal cord injury, so we were helping him. My mother was sick. She had just recently died, or she would die soon in that time. And we had little kids. So my wife and I were, trying to pay the mortgage and doing other things. So Haiti kind of fell to the side. And then there was a coup in 2004. President Aristide, you'll recall, was I forget which order he was, but he happened to be elected president of the country of Haiti. He was from the slums, and he spoke very directly to the poor, and they elected him in a landslide with a landslide vote. But he was ousted in a coup in February of 2004, and there was this interim government in place. And there was about 10 months later, St. Vincent's at the time was heading south economically, fiscally. And so they laid off all the doctors in the ER, including myself. So I was sort of hanging around, kind of feeling sorry for myself. And my wife said, why don't you go to Haiti? And I sort of looked at her, and I sort of shrugged, and the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. So I wound up going there. She threw a birthday party for me, and at the party we raised, in lieu of gifts. Fortunately, it was not in lieu of flowers yet, but it was in lieu of birthday gifts. People contributed to that, and we raised $14,000 at that birthday party. And so with that, we went down, myself and another guy from Montclair, who he was a very funny guy. His name was Paul, and he knew nothing about medicine. He owned a toy store, in fact. But he was about 6'5", and he was a great comedy. So it was a good accompaniment. So anyway, we went in and we had contacted some people in advance. I made contact with a woman, Judy Da Cruz, who's a human rights lawyer, and we opened up an ER at a hospital that had been closed in the area, this sort of big bad area known as City Soleil. And very naively, our driver wouldn't drive us into City Soleil. So we had to walk about a mile into the center of City Soleil, because the driver said it was too dangerous for him to go inside of a vehicle. So there was the three of us, myself, this guy, Paul, another guy from Montclair, and this woman, Judy, who weighed about 90 pounds, dripping wet, as a human rights lawyer. And so that was the very beginning.
Jim, this was just like, you found this place, you just showed up?
Well, Judy was a contact that that I had come to know. And the issue at the time was that Cité Soleil was in the country. Cité Soleil had been essentially abandoned. It was considered so dangerous that public health workers wouldn't go there. So there was a hospital there, but nobody in the hospital would go there. Gangs controlled the perimeter of the region. This is an area that typically would have about 300,000 people living in it. Now was down to maybe about, we'll say about half that amount. Most of them driven out by gang violence. So this was an area that people were allowed to, ostensibly allowed to come and go, but you did so at your own risk. And so why did we go there? We thought it was the worst place that, I had, on that first trip with Vin Biaggi, I had met another guy who was a human rights lawyer named Tom, and he and I became friends. And we knew what was going on in Haiti, and we developed some friendships. It's not an enormous network of people that are working down there, so it's like sort of like Catholic school administrators on the East Coast. There's a finite number of them, and you get to know one another, and you know what projects this person's working on or that person's working on. So we heard about Cité Soleil, and we said, wow, this place really is in bad shape. So let's start there.
Jim, I probably should ask this first, because, I sort of ask about Haiti and, making some assumptions, right? That people know something about the nation beyond the fact that it exists. Can you, maybe I don't spend too much time, but give people a quick introduction of Haiti, the people, the language, the place,
Sure.
the history of Haiti in 90 seconds.
Yeah. It's about 3.5 hours from JFK to Port-au-Prince, direct flight, for those of you brave souls who'd like to go there. It was initially discovered, quote unquote, discovered by Columbus in 1492. 200 years later, the indigenous population did not exist anymore. The western 1/3 was occupied by France, and the eastern 2/3 by Spain. There was the first successful slave revolution in the history of mankind occurred there in the late 1700s, and they finally were liberated in 1804. Which was about 60 years, of course, prior to the emancipation of slavery here in the United States. So they were not recognized by any of the great powers, any of the great economic powers. And in fact, there were essentially sanctions against them. So it really was a difficult time for them economically. It has gone through its own sort of morass of leaders who were perhaps not the greatest for the country, but it's been subject to a lot of outside influence. The first free election actually occurred when President Aristide was elected. And that was the very first time there was a legitimate democratic election. There had been a quote unquote democratic election during the early 20th century, but only landowners were allowed to vote. Only white landowners were allowed to vote in that, and you had to be male as well, and you had to be a slave owner. So it limited most people would not consider that a free and fair election. Anyway, so from a democracy standpoint, the country is a few decades old. So it's just out of the starting gates.
So and there's so many places to go. I want to let's go to the work of LAMP now, because it is a thriving organization, right? In terms of the work it's done, the service to the community. Give us a glimpse of, in 2022, the work the work that LAMP is doing, and the staff, and how it's become this success. And then I'm going to pivot a little bit into sort of motivations and directions.
Okay. And you were there, Jack, I think, with me. That was about 4 years ago, I think. Does that sound about right?
Yes. Yeah. And it was, Jim, as it was a great. Jim had been inviting me to join him for a while, and often though Jim is turning on a dime and going, down there, like, it's Thursday. Oh, I'll go down next Thursday, right? So we had finally planned this, and it was July. I guess it'll be 4 years ago this July. I was so glad I went. I want to go back, and I still 4 years later cannot speak adequately to the experience. I can't make sense of most of what I saw and experience. Some pieces I can, other times, right, words fall. I just do not have the words. I don't know that I have the meaning, but I know if I do have the meaning, I don't have the words. So, but one thing that I can speak about is, being at LAMP and sort of seeing folks in action, and the clinic in action, and the meaning of the place. So anyway, yes.
So yeah, I'm glad. It's a hard place to go to, and as I said, my dad helped to start Manhattan Bowery Project, which was a program in I think it started in 1968 for homeless alcoholics down on the Bowery, on the Lower East Side of the Bowery. And it wasn't like he was dragging us down there, but I knew what the Bowery looked like. And so, and I'd been to some tougher parts of New York City and Chicago, and I thought I knew what, difficult life was. But boy, when I first went into Cité Soleil, it was incredible, like to see that level of, of depravity, really. And when I say that, meaning material depravity, okay? So clean water, they're, having access to potable water, having access to, electricity, having access to a toilet, having access to being able to eat. So it's not uncommon today even that families, people will come in and they'll tell us that they eat 5 meals in a week. That's not uncommon of what we see. So, when we first went in there, we decided, I mentioned that I had opened up this ER for a couple of weeks, and we did a few of these trips. And I'm hoping that my wife is not listening to this today, because she probably knows by now, but we pilfered somewhat of the bank accounts to pay for the airfare and the medications, and we were paying staff and things like that. And then we decided, rather than sort of parachuting in, we wanted to plant some roots and have something grow organically. So we met with some local leaders in Cité Soleil, local area leaders like school principals, local ministers, people that were doing some things and had lived in Cité Soleil, in this area. What the section of it is called Bois Neuf, which means wood 9, and where most of the homes are wooden, and it's off of Route 9. So that's they call it Wood 9. So anyway, so we met with them and we asked them, what is it that you think you would want? And they told us, we think we need security, we need jobs, we need education and healthcare and food. And we said, we can't do all those things, but of all those, can you pick one? And they said healthcare. So anyway, so we started a very small clinic, and we were able to pay for one doctor 2 half days a week, and one manager, and a few, basic medications. And then we grew it from there, and we started sort of organizing. And we were doing house parties, and we spoke at churches, and then we networked with other people. And then we formed a board, and we became an official 501c3 organization, filed with the IRS. And we started to grow. And initially, when I first started going down there, they needed my services so that the place could operate, because we didn't have another doctor. And that was always going to be sort of a Band-Aid for us. There's kind of 2 models for this type of care. One model is still good, sort of Doctors Without Borders will use that. And they're kind of like having an ER, right? Like a roving ER, like they're in Ukraine now. Now is not the time for Doctors Without Borders to start training doctors how to be ER doctors. We need them there now. So they'll parachute in people from Europe and the United States and things like that. But for development, really the newer model, and the model that we certainly utilize, is one that's based on really working with the local staff as best, or the local community as much as you can, utilizing local talent, developing local talent, working with Ministry of Health, not in a silo, but working with them, utilizing generic drugs whenever possible, and really trying to make it, grow from the ground up. So we did that over time, and we were able to develop a board. We have we had an executive director initially who was, and then we had somebody else who we were fortunate to be able to get, a guy by the name of Henry Reimer, who's really superlative. He's become a great friend of mine as well. Henry is, Henry is sort of an enigma to me to this day. He's got a heart of gold. His parents were Mennonite missionaries themselves. He spent part of his time in Calcutta, India. He's worked in Ethiopia and Haiti before coming to LAMP. So he's been with us now for, I think, near 10 years. But just really, we've grown then from having one doctor 2 half days a week to now we have, anywhere from 20 to 25 people that work for us down there, all patient, all paid a fair wage, all paid, in addition to that, we have ultrasound, we have digital x-ray, we have a pharmacy, we have a laboratory, we have a nutrition program for children. And, patients come in, we ask them to contribute about 10 good, which is about 10 cents. It costs us about $25 to see a patient. But we want them to be involved in it to the degree that they can. You can imagine somebody that's able to afford 5 meals a week doesn't have a whole lot of extra money to buy medication. So we provide them with the majority of the meds.
So, and Jim, as I know, right, the gang activity flares up and down, right, in Cité Soleil, and yet, through much of that, right, yes, at its worst, you guys have had to step back for a few days here and there, but you've sustained this through thick and thin.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Which is a great gift. I think, and I say this admiringly, right? I want to be careful of my language, but like, you visit there and nothing makes sense, right? Nothing makes sense, at least for me, and the only way it begins to make sense, right, and is if we're not seeing it sort of through our eyes, or in some sense human eyes, right? There is an aspect to this, right? Let me go. I'm just back from pilgrimage in Spain, as you know, and one of the things Father Matt Malone said in a homily there, right, in a homily that he gave at Manresa, and he was speaking about Ignatius's conversion there, right, and he said, or his writing of the exercises there, and really, we speak of conversion as if it's a moment, right, where that is really, I think, for most, an ongoing journey that begins at some point and, probably meets its ultimate end in the beatific vision. But, he was saying, what happened here? What happened to Ignatius? And he said, Easter happened, right? One word, Easter happened, right? And only through that lens, right, where death leads to life, where sorrow brings joy, do things make sense, right, and start to make sense. Ignatius's experience, our experience as Christians. And you've used in your own, when you're speaking at the Hall of Fame, in your own description, language like conversion, right? Jim recently gave a talk on Paul Farmer, right? And was talking about sort of a religious dimension to that word. Can you speak to these questions of vocation and faith and that lens on this, right? Because it's the only way with what you're doing. Like any sane man leaves there. I came home. Now, I don't want to claim sanity, but I came home and spent days doing math. What if we closed the country? We could take those 8.5 million people, move them to Montana. They'd all have enough space, right? And just start over, because it can't be any worse, right? I realize the absurdity of what I'm saying, the insulting nature of what I'm saying, but like, that's where I was, because being there didn't make sense. So
Yeah,
I don't have a question there, but there's plenty for you to comment on what I've just said.
yeah. You know, it's a great place. So you can see behind me, this, I'm in my office at work, and over this shoulder is a Celtic cross, and over this other shoulder is a print, and that the original of that is an oil oil painting that's in my living room, and that's Lamp. It's a woman, you know, sitting very humbly. I really love that painting. But it's you can see the light, and that little white spot above the light is a dove. And these are those two objects behind me are there deliberately with a lot of intentionality, not just because I needed something for the wall, but for a lot of intentionality. You know, part of me feels that I need to be sort of underneath these two objects. I feel that without an underlying and an overarching sense of connection, as you know, as Archbishop Romero spoke, connection to the historical body of Christ. That there were times early on when I was doing this work when I didn't have that. There were a lot of times, in fact, most of the time I didn't have that. But as I get older, it's easy for me to see how people can burn out on this. And it's easy for me to see that people would want to stop putting themselves in harm's way. And I'm not certainly doing that a lot. Once in a while it does happen, but it's pretty rare nowadays. But many, you know, many people would say, I'm not doing that. Why would you do that? And for me, though, a part of it is really having done a lot more reading and studying about some of these people like Romero, who really talked about this idea that this is what we're called to do, is to be the body of Christ in history. In other words, I'm called to be a part of Christ as a member of the church. I'm called to be Christ, not Christ-like, but I'm called to be a part of Christ. That's a tall order for any of us. And it's what's happened kind of weirdly and almost inexplicably for me has been a conversion, and I'll use that term because it's been almost sort of an arc. I don't know, you know, in Chicago along the Lakeshore Drive, they used to have, it was called an S-curve. And it was, Lakeshore Drive is like a highway. It's like driving down Route 3. I don't know who came up with this idea, but all of a sudden it would turn left, like a 90-degree turn, and you would go a little bit, and then it would turn right. So you can imagine all the cars. Chicago, nobody told them. It took a guy from New Jersey to let them know that there's a lot of ice in Chicago in the winter. So cars would crash into this thing all the time. And, you know, and so I find myself sometimes thinking that I'm sort of on this conversion turn, and I crash into that wall, you know, regularly, because I don't want to turn. But the more I allow myself to, to be guided by this concept of being a part of the body of Christ in history. And believe me, it happens infrequently, but when it does happen, I don't crash into that wall, and I'm able to make that turn as if it's a beautiful spring day and not the middle of January with ice on the ground. And so I use that metaphor because it's really helped me to be able to continue to feel energized and to feel that I do have almost a liberated spirit. Not that I'm cavalier in, if there is danger that's lurking around, and it's not that I'm looking for trouble, but this is, I know now, 20 years into this, from having seen us grow from a place where there were pigs walking around, and there were, in 2000 and early 2005, there were dead bodies on the way in to this area where we worked that we would walk past, who had been killed by gang leaders or by gangs, and seeing small children with horrific, sometimes with horrific wounds that could have been readily treated with the appropriate antibiotics, to where we are today, where we have a functioning health center providing quality, cost-effective healthcare. I know that we've made great progress. I know that that I'm but one cog in this machine that I've helped to create. I didn't create it on my own, but I've been a part of it, of that. And on a personal level, that energy and that motivation has really been, has really come from, for me, again, on a very personal level, from a faith which has seen me falter many, many times, but which continues to be there for me. Saint Benedict, the Benedictine rule is always we begin again. So to have that concept to be there for me each day or each time that I visit a place like Cité Soleil, and to be around people that are putting their lives on the line almost on a daily basis. So I go down, once in a while, but like our staff is going into this every day. They're heroic, and so for me to be able to call somebody like our medical director, a colleague like Dr. Hippolyte, who I spoke with, I speak with regularly on the phone, is a privilege. And so that is, for me, really important. And it's a great gift for me to be able to do this.
Thank you for that. Jim, can you speak? And I realize these go into, really personal pieces of the puzzle here, but right, how we live as people. Your own prayer life in terms of how that helps sustain what you're speaking about now, how it challenges, where consolations and desolations there.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's somebody that's really helped me in the last few years, and I guess like most of us, we sort of find somebody that seems to resonate with us at this time in our lives. Richard Rohr has been very helpful to me in his writings and his lectures. The concept of contemplative prayer has really been important for me, particularly in the last, I would say, 5 years. this notion that that my actions are a prayer. My life is a prayer. So when I'm going, I walk by, I was just upstairs and on one of the floors in the hospital, and I, walking and talking with somebody that's cleaning one of the rooms and engaging that person and looking at that as a prayer. That has been very helpful to me. People that have been, sort of personal historical figures, people like King and John Lewis, really people that I think are have been quite dramatic in their capacity to obviously to motivate us for the greater glory, for another reason bigger than me. I just was reading, you mentioned Matt Malone. I was just reading in America, there's an article that Pope Francis, I guess, had, he was talking about the heterodox, the false claim of gnosis, in the Greek gnosis, of that, that we can be just, only sacramental, or only, perhaps sacramental is the wrong term, but only kind of spiritual, only in church. That's ludicrous. That there has to be some action there. But for me, looking at that there has to be action there, it's like anything else. When I feel pushed into something, I don't want to do it. But when I feel invited into doing it, and then realizing that, wow, that's, what a great gift to look, as Rohr would say, to be a part of this, to be a part of Christ with somebody else that's in the room, whether it's somebody, a patient here, or somebody that is a colleague down in Haiti, or somebody who's, a patient in Haiti. What a great gift that is.
No, thank you for that. I was another version of that question, which you addressed, was sort of where you draw inspiration from, and I know of your affection for John Lewis, who you got to meet not too long before he passed away. Again, thanks to Ellen's inspiration. So I think of that meeting. I have this message from the grave, if you will, that was published right after he died, sitting outside my office as inspiration for folks who pause to read it. Jim, our time's drawing to a close. I want to. This is maybe a totally different direction, an unfair direction, but I think your experience of Haiti gives you a different lens to. I'm assuming gives you a different lens to see America, right? And I'm thinking especially to try to make meaning of the America of today, whether it's, America in its goodness, but also America in its complication, right? Whether it's racial strife, whether it's this divisiveness in society, the political divisiveness, whether it is in so many ways, right, a failure to see in one another the dignity, the presence of God, that we are indeed, part of the body of Christ, right? Any thoughts on making meaning of your experience here in light of the experience in Haiti, or making meaning of America today in light of the experience of Haiti? Or maybe the issue is, what lessons do we need to take from your experience there to try to do better here?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that comes to mind is actually, it was a retreat that I took. It was, of course, a Jesuit retreat, they spoke about this concept of a pilgrimage. So the difference between being a tourist and a pilgrim is big. So when you're a pilgrim, you really you embrace the local culture and local flavors, and you try to learn the language, and in other words, you're trying to find out something from that person's perspective, to kind of walk in their moccasins, if you will. And that concept has really helped me a lot. When I do that, I feel that it makes my blood pressure go up a lot less, and it gives me it makes me tend towards putting on a smile, and it makes me tend towards, I think, a little bit more compassionate, and I think that's that's the kind of person I'm trying to be. Trust me, I fail a lot more than I succeed, but when I do it, it helps.
Yeah. Well, that failure is the gift of our humanity, right? So that's certainly okay. I think that's that sense of pilgrim, right, and encounter, right? How do we? I think there's a gift there, and that's a good note for us to end on, right? I think maybe we need to be better pilgrims in our own land, right? And, that may be a starting point. Great, Jim. Thanks so much to our audience. Let me say, and of course, I didn't discuss this with Jim, but if there are those out there that say, "Hey, I want to be present with the people of City Soleil, and you're interested in heading down there, call me, and Jim and I will work on pulling something together." Because let me dispel any myth that you're going down there to save the world, or if you go, you may be a small contribution to saving yourself, right? So I say that in all sincerity. If there's an interest in being there, right, it is not as tourist, but as pilgrim. Jim and I are happy to put something together for you. And it'll be the cheapest pilgrimage you're ever on. JetBlue airfare from Kennedy is not bad. You can get there on air train, and we can live very simply there. So that's one piece of the puzzle. Second piece of the puzzle, if you'd like to know more about LAMP, right? Go to their website, Lamb for Haiti. There's some neat information there. There's a little video. You get a glimpse of things. You'll also see that, as charities go, they are wonderful stewards of the resources people share with them. Right? There's an organization, Charity Navigator, who essentially rates nonprofits. Right? There are a lot of nonprofits who raise money, and not enough of it goes to their mission and their cause. And LAMP is sort of the opposite, right? The money they raise goes to LAMP, right? And goes a long way and does good there. So if you're in a spot where you feel you'd like to support this, please do. I kind of ask you not to do that at the expense of Xavier. If you're so motivated, make it a both ends. But if you were ever gonna stop supporting us and look for somebody to go to, that's a good place to go to. Please don't stop supporting us. If you want to do that, call me or call Jim. But
be our secret. Be our secret.
There we go. And I'll close with really asking you to keep the work of Lamb for Haiti, keep Jim's work in your prayers as you keep the work of Xavier in your prayers as well. So this week, take a little bit of a summer recess from our 175th anniversary conversations, and nothing on tap for June, but we will be back to you soon thereafter. We've had a great lineup, in-house and online over the last few months, and a lot of different perspectives. Then Police Commissioner Dermot Shea, former U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr, Jim Martin, the Greg Boyle, Jim Morgan. So people who've invited us to consider where we are and hopefully help us consider how we make mission real at Xavier. So Jim, thanks again for being with us. Thanks to all who tuned in to join us. thank Ellen for sharing you with us again as we kept you in the office. And we hope to see all of you soon and visit the LAMP site. And if you're interested, reach out to me or reach out to Susan Cardosa in my office. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jack. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.